The news out of Ukraine this morning, 6 people were injured after Russian forces dropped guided bombs on a kindergarten and residential buildings in the south of Ukraine, Kherson City. Let's go live to Ukraine and Joseph Lindsley. Joseph, we hear these horrific stories every day now, but we can't become numb to this. We've got to somehow stay focused on what's going on over there.
Indeed, Bob, and hello from the city of Kharkiv. Not only the story you just cited from Kherson, which is a city that is undergoes almost daily shelling. They suffered under Russian occupation for almost a year. Now they're still suffering the effects of the Russians destroying that dam, the Novokakhovka Dam, back in June. And there's so many aid workers that go down there to help, and they're constantly at risk of Russian shelling. The Russians also, in a neighboring province to Kharkiv, here in the northeast of Ukraine, in the Sumy province, Russians also hit another school. 2 education workers were killed. They're still looking for survivors, and this was yesterday. So it is, as you say, it's a daily occurrence, and to not become numb to it, I think that's exactly why President Zelensky just had this tour, sort of a blitz tour of Europe, and he got a great response. When he was in the Kingdom of Denmark, people were in the streets waving the Ukrainian flag, cheering for him. The Queen of Denmark gave him a painting she made herself of the Tree of Life. And so we do see, I think especially with these small countries in Europe, they realize, how easily, you could lose your sovereignty, you could lose your independence. They recall the history of World War II. More and more, they're realizing also that victory is possible. They see how Ukrainians have held on. And today, tomorrow will be Ukrainian Independence Day. Here in Kharkiv, it's the day of the city. So it's a holiday. As you go around the city, people say Zesviatom, which means happy holiday. There's Ukrainian flags everywhere. Some people are wearing the traditional veshivanka, the traditional embroidered garments. It's also Ukrainian Flag Day. And so there's a sense of, even a sense of joy and patriotism here in this lovely city. All the beautiful parks. People are out taking a walk. You saw grandparents with their little granddaughter. It seems, in these moments between attacks, it seems very peaceful. I just enjoyed a nice Neapolitan pizza. It's about 75 degrees, and you see the city reawakening. I've been in Kharkiv, in the winter when there were missile attacks every other day, and it was very quiet. Now the city is really coming back to life. And I was just talking with a friend who was as often as he can goes into villages that were occupied by the Russians to help people rebuild. And they've started a new scheme to bring vegetables that were grown in these formerly occupied villages to sell them in restaurants in the city. And so you see people being creative, and working together to rebuild even as Russia's war continues. And it's also an occasion to recall today, as we look at the eve of Ukrainian independence, in August 1991, when the hell of the Soviet Union was collapsing, President George H.W. Bush went to Kyiv. And in a speech that was written by Condi Rice, he urged Ukrainians to vote against independence. It was a safer option. He said that nationalism could be suicidal. Now, if you look at it, we see that, when you choose to be free, the tyrants don't like it. And that's why there's missiles coming at Ukraine every single day. But Ukrainians insisted back then, in the referendum, they voted, I think it was 92% for independence. They did not listen to George H.W. Bush and Condi Rice. They said, we will be free, because for centuries, they were striving to maintain their, not only to maintain their culture and language and tradition, but actually, Moscow had banned those things. And so simply to exist as Ukrainians was a struggle for centuries. And now you could say they're closer than ever. But, everyone there's a lot of confidence here, but yet everyone knows that, the closer Ukraine gets to the possibility of victory, there could be very dark days ahead. And I think people are strong for that in a way that maybe they weren't even a year ago. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that speech by George H.W. Bush, critics later called it the chicken Kyiv speech after the famous dish here, because they said, the Ukrainians said, no, we're not going to be chickens, we're going to be courageous. H.W. Bush was a former CIA director, and Ukrainians are, not bureaucrats. They insist on being free. It's deeply a part of their DNA, and that's something I really feel walking around this city of Kharkiv today, just 30 miles from Russia. in a totally free city. But at any moment, of course, as we know, missiles could hit.
I saw a BBC report yesterday that was about recruitment of soldiers there and questioning some of the extreme methods the Ukrainians are using to get people in the army. Are they having trouble replenishing the forces there?
Well, I saw that story as well. And on the margins, there have been, in this sort of now disbanded service, President Zelensky last week fired the heads of the regional recruitment centers. He had complained months ago, the guys that ran these recruiting offices were never in the front lines. They were sort of, like fat cats far away from the battle. And there had been a lot of tension in certain cities, including Odessa and the outskirts of Lviv. It was a Soviet-era agency, and they would sometimes just give people random conscription papers on the street. The Ukrainian people said, this is not right. We don't want this. And Zelensky and the government responded by now they're working to reform that system. So there has been a bit of that, but you don't see, it's not a police state. You see it. I've never encountered one of those incidents walking around. I don't know anyone. I think two people that personally were given those papers on the street. They were temporarily detained. But they were not yet supposed to be in the military. They made a few phone calls and everything was sorted out. So I think that story was a bit overhyped. Ukrainian, now there's a pretty good system of people who are trained in the military. In fact, so much so that when soldiers are injured, if their injuries are not too horrible, they go back to the fight because so much has been invested in training them. And so I think there's a stability now that there wasn't in the first few months of the war. We do know, of course, that the fatalities have been awful. And yesterday we were talking about the civilian deaths, but even most of the soldiers in Ukraine were civilians on February 23rd, 2022. This is a fight of the people, against the tyranny. And that's something we always have to remember, that most of these guys were not professional soldiers. But there is, I think everyone I talk with has those who are not yet in the military know that at any moment, their time could come, and people go to training camps and try to be ready. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, we have the good news. Very small news at a time in the counteroffensive, but there was a village called Robotny that was liberated in Zaporizhia after 1.5 years of occupation. They were liberated, and I just saw a video of a villager there. She said she couldn't believe that the Ukrainian soldiers were coming into their city. She said, we are very grateful to our boys, very grateful. So we have good news there, while we still have difficult news in the region of Kupiansk, here in the Kharkiv region. It's Ukraine keeps saying they need, of course, the fighter jets and more weapons. Meanwhile, they're holding the ground, and the big question is, will Russia try something spectacular on Independence Day? There were drone attacks in Moscow last night, and also attacks in the Crimean Peninsula, seemingly from Ukraine. That's the situation we're in right now.
Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine, thank you as always. I hope you can enjoy more of that pizza, Joe.
Thanks. And Bob, I want to thank Jim Gamache from Chicago. He and friends from Chicago just raised money to help buy a drone. And so that drone is on the way now to soldiers. And also thanks to Tom from Atlanta, who listens to WGN, who's also helping support a drone. So thank you all, and until tomorrow.
Great news. Until tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important, that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Що він сказав?
Well, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?